Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the continuation of our series, Exiles Among Empires. We are going to be talking about politics yet again. See if anybody's just walking out on that one. If you're new here and this is, you're a guest and this is your first Sunday, I'm sorry, because we were really going to go for it today. And we're going to be talking about some things. I just want to encourage you, as I did last time, that if you could, try to hear the rest of them. And if you didn't hear last week's message, try to go back online and check out that one as well. Think of these as like one message on politics, because I'm not going to sufficiently nuance this thing enough. And I actually love talking about politics, and I don't really do it much, especially from here, because I try to stay in my lane. Like my work here is to build the local church and to open up the scriptures and to teach the Bible and apply it to all of our lives and help all of us grow in our relationship with Jesus and all of that. And so I really do try to stay in my lane, and politics usually isn't a big part of it. But this is a political series, so I get to go. I get to go crazy. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cram more of my personal politics into this message than I have ever crammed into in fact, not even into a message, maybe than I have ever crammed into a single conversation ever. And so that's what we're gonna be doing here. And so just hold on and let's see what happens. Well, all right, I'll start off by saying I am a citizen here of the U.S., and I genuinely love this country. It has been good to me, and I think I have been good to it. If you are a conservative here in the room right now, I would like you to just glare at a liberal for the next part that we're going to do here. Just, the look I'm talking about. Just do that right now. So I think that freedom is important. The founders of this country created one of the most equitable and just societies that the world has ever known. The country's Constitution and Bill of Rights continues to adapt and shape an impressive civilization. Ever since I was a child, ever since I was young, I have had these more conservative leanings. I have always felt strongly about traditional family values, always felt like they were important. I am pro-life. I favor small government, traditional sexual ethics. I think the way the government hands out money to the needy is, in fact, in need of a major overhaul. Though I don't consider myself a gun guy or even a Second Amendment guy, I am a sportsman and I am a hunter, and I own numerous guns. A few shotguns of different sorts, 22s. I have a 30-06 that would fell a bear, and I own a Glock. I love our police and our armed forces. I support a strong military. Patriotism, the 4th of July parades, Memorial Day parades, honoring our veterans, I think all of these are important to me. I also think that there should be zero illegal immigration. I encourage and want to bring manufacturing back to America and move away from dependence on globalized markets. I drive an American-made truck that gets terrible gas mileage, and thereby doing that, I support American oil production. I support Ukraine, mostly because I don't like Russia or Putin. And I support Israel. I think it is appalling that this administration has not done more to free its citizens that are still being held in tunnels by Hamas, not to mention the Israelis that are still languishing in those same tunnels. I like country music, even country worship music. Do not judge. I often wear flannel. Rarely, maybe never, have I voted for a Democrat in a national election. This is mostly based on my pro-life, pro-family, small government, and strong military leanings. I would venture to say that I am more classically conservative than many of you. I will not be voting for Harris. I have also never voted for Trump, and I never will. Now, none of this is to tell you whether you should be voting or not. I will be voting. I just won't be voting for either of those candidates. It is also not to tell you who to vote for. I am absolutely 100% certain that God is going to put into office exactly who we deserve. So whoever rules the empire of Rome or Babylon or America in this next round is actually of little interest to me. Now, on the other side of the political spectrum, if you are a liberal here this morning, please would you, with compassion, grab the hand of the person conservative closest to you. Just go ahead and grab their hand and give them just a small hint of condescension. And then here we go. I support a massive restructuring of the economic and wealth-producing engine that America has created. I think a major restructuring of our tax code is in order to make wealthy corporations and rich people pay more of the burden. I think a massive redistribution of wealth is needed. Basic services like education and healthcare, they should be universally available to everyone who lives in the U.S. I think that systemic racism and economic classism need to be confronted and unraveled in every area and part of our government and our society. I think that the country needs more immigrants, millions and millions more, with a quick and easy path toward citizenship, and that immigrants should not be kept in limbo, thereby creating an abusable class of people. I think we spend too much on our military and we trust too much in our military might, and that makes us less dependent on God. I am not a fan of the accumulation of generational wealth, and I would actually favor radical strategies to prevent and disrupt it. I'm not sure that a goal for the middle class is to lower costs. We seem to be doing just fine. A little bit of belt tightening would actually be better, and higher taxes would help us send more money to the world's poor. Housing is an issue, and heavy government regulation is needed in order to bring the minimum wage and housing and food costs into some sort of healthier alignment. In fact, while we're at it, let's abolish the income tax altogether and create a punitive consumption tax on luxury items, wasteful items, and anything that hurts the environment. I think America should gear up to protect Taiwan and, in fact, help stop injustices around the world, even when it does not have a bearing on American first politics. My support of Israel is not primarily rooted in the Bible or their role as God's chosen people, but rather that they are a friend of the U.S. and a liberal democracy in a part of the country, in a part of the world where that is uncommon. I support the Palestinian people, many of whom are likely descendants of Abraham. I think that they need a homeland of their own. Maybe we should consider offering them some land to call their own here in the continental U.S., maybe in the Midwest somewhere. Okay, I don't really believe that one. But some of my left-leaning politics might just be a little too much, even for those of you who voted for Hope under Obama or who will vote for a new way forward in a few weeks. So if you like what you hear in this, good news. Today I am announcing my candidacy for Emperor of the World. And so, Emperor of the World, Babel, America, this would be absolutely amazing. And if you're in favor, we'll start a political action committee or whatever they do to get this sort of a thing going. Now, if you do not like what you hear, remember, I also reserve the right to change my mind on any political position at any time that I think the scriptures and wisdom dictated. And based in conversations with you, I will probably change some of those positions, certainly in this next few months and round that we're going. So what does that make me? Am I left? Am I right? Am I somewhere? I don't actually know. I don't actually care. These aren't labels that matter to me, or I don't know that they ought to matter to us in general. I mean, what does it matter? What I'm hoping for is that increasingly that my politics are being formed by my best understanding of the scriptures. What is the application of biblical wisdom, and how does that apply to these very real and thorny and difficult issues that this country faces? That's what I'm hoping to. And I think that is what every follower of Jesus is actually called to do. If Jesus is your king, it must impact your politics. We are exiles among empire. That's what we had talked about last week. And what we had said is that we, as followers of Jesus, we pledge our allegiance to King Jesus, to our people, first and foremost. And there is no close second. When we talked about the Gospel of Matthew last week, we saw that Matthew, he uses this language, Messiah, King. He goes all the way back in the genealogies. He ties it to Abraham, and he runs it right through King David because he's teaching us things about that. Go check out last week, and you'll see he's teaching us the kind of citizens that we will be in God's new kingdom. And it's very, very strategic what Matthew is doing there. And then we saw that John the Baptist and Jesus, they both announced this new kingdom and this new king. And my personal politics and yours, they ought to be formed by this new king. And we should be able to discuss and listen and change based not what the puppets of this empire are telling us and what they are promoting, but what King Jesus commands us. And so we follow this Messiah, and he shows us that our power is not having the political power to crucify. That's not what he was going after. In fact, his power came by being the one willing to be crucified. We want to grasp political power. We're missing the whole of his message. If you want real power, then be willing to be crucified like our King. And see what God does through that kind of sacrificial life and death. Because we, as exiles among empires, we are citizens of this new king. We are citizens of this new kingdom, exiles among empires. And what this tells us is that America is not our true home. We are sojourning here. Just like Abraham and Jesus lived as exiles among empires, so we also are called to live as exiles in the midst of America. And this biblical theology of exile is so important for this series. It's the main theme. I want to hit it again, and I found one of the tightest and thoroughly biblical summaries of this topic that I have actually seen. So I hope you are fans of the Bible Project.
There's something about being home, where everything's just right. We're surrounded by people we love and trust. There's a feeling of stability and safety.
And while some people get to experience this kind of home, many do not. Others might even be forced to leave their home and go live in a foreign land. We call this going into exile.
Yeah, in exile, everything is disoriented. You're in the unknown.
And in the story of the Bible, this is where the ancient Israelites found themselves, conquered by Babylon, living in exile far from their homeland.
And so they had to ask themselves, how did we end up here? And is there any hope of going home?
And the whole story of the Bible is designed to address those very questions.
The whole story? Really?
Yeah, go back to the first pages of the Bible. Where does humanity live?
Okay, they live in this really sweet garden, their home.
And they're there on one condition, that they trust and follow God's one command, and they don't. And so the consequence is banishment from the garden.
They're sent into exile.
Exactly. And so this story has been designed to set you up for Israel's story, how they were given the gift of the promised land and were able to stay there on one condition, that they be faithful to the terms of their covenant relationship with God.
They didn't, and they were sent into exile.
And if you still don't see the parallel between exile from the garden and exile from Israel, think about this. In Genesis, humanity's exile led up to the story about the building of what city?
Oh yeah, Babylon. The same place the Israelites are sent.
But that's not the end of either story. In the first Babylon, God called Abraham to leave and travel to the promised land. And that story was designed to give hope to the Israelites currently living in the later Babylon.
Now eventually, they do get to leave and travel back to their promised homeland.
And when they did, it wasn't home sweet home. Oppressive empires were still ruling over them, and the people kept acting in the same corrupt ways as their ancestors. And so the biblical prophets said that exile wasn't actually over.
How could they think they were still in exile when they're at home?
Yeah, this is really important. In the Hebrew scriptures, Israel's Babylonian exile became an image of something more universal. It's that feeling of alienation and longing for something more, no matter where you live.
Yeah, I can relate to this. I have a great home, but it's situated in a world scarred with pain and broken relationships, death, and tragedy, done by others, but also done by me.
And so in the Bible, exile is the human condition. We all keep repeating this pattern of human corruption leading to a Babylon that we can't escape. And it doesn't matter where you live, we are all longing for a better home.
Now, Israel's scriptures held out hope that one day God would send a king who would rescue the world from all of the Babylons we've created.
And after many generations pass, we meet this Israelite named Jesus of Nazareth. He wandered about with no home, announcing the great restoration, that reality of home that Israel and all humanity has been looking for.
Yeah, Jesus really cared about people who didn't have homes. He welcomed in the stranger. He said God's love is shown when you invite in the outcast and throw parties for people who don't have a place to belong.
Jesus also claimed that Israel and all humanity had lost its way, that our self-centeredness drives us to create false homes based on status and power, and these inevitably exclude others. We live in an exile of our own making. But Jesus said the true way home is one of weakness, of service, and of forgiveness. And then Jesus went into exile alongside us to show us the true way home.
Which is?
Well, Jesus said he is the way. His life and self-giving love proved more powerful than humanity's failure. He opened up a pathway to our real home. And as Jesus' followers committed themselves to him, they discovered this new way of being human. They believed that the real return from exile had begun. And so they would call themselves sojourners or wanderers.
Oh, right. They would say things like, the world isn't our home, and we're citizens of heaven.
And so Jesus' followers remain exiles as they wait for that day when Jesus returns to transform this world into a true home.
And if you're a follower of Jesus, this is you. You are in exile now. And just like Abraham before us, as exiles living among empires, we have been called to be a blessing to the nations. To every place that you find yourself, every home and every workplace and every nation that you find yourselves in, that we find ourselves in, we are to be a blessing. And how is it that we will be the blessing? And we see it. We've already seen it in the scriptures that we started to look at. The exiles embrace the ethic of their king. This is how we actually become a blessing no matter whatever else is going on. This was the original promise to Abraham in Genesis 12. This is, in fact, what was announced by God. So God calls Abraham 4,000 years ago to live as an exile in a country that was not his own. Then, around 3,500 years ago, he establishes Israel in the land of Palestine. That country was led out of slavery by Moses, and they were up on a mountain given the new law, the code that would govern their society. And throughout the Old Testament, you will see how God had structured his new people, the nation of Israel, in the kind of what we would call an upside-down kingdom that they were supposed to be. And we say it was an upside-down kingdom. So I'm reading this book by Preston Sprinkle. It's actually called Exiles, Church in the Shadow of Empire. It's an excellent, excellent book. It's one of the few that I'm reading for this particular series. And in there, he points out that the way that God was implementing this upside-down kingdom was by giving the Jewish people rules that none of the other nations had. A whole new set of laws that were, in fact, different. There were some similarities and others that were so categorically and structurally different as to be declared unique in the ancient Near East. For instance, kings. Kings in the ancient Near East were powerful. They actually were sort of like demigods, Many of them had elements of divinity attached to them. And when those guys had the kind of power that they would grab and grasp and take and collect, sometimes they owned everything. They had massive amounts of wealth. They had harems that were enormous, and they were used for political alliances as well as for their own pleasure. And everyone in the ancient world would have thought this was normal. This is actually how kings show their power. Israel flipped all of those things on its head. Said, no, you're not better than the people. You're actually going to, Deuteronomy 17, you're going to be one of the people. You're picked from among the people. This is just something that they did for their kings. You're one of the people. Oh yeah, large amounts of money, you can't collect it. That's not for you to do. Harem? No. Bad news. Nothing good's going to come out of that. Nowhere, historians tell us that nowhere in the ancient Near East were there restrictions put on the amount of wealth, the status, or the size of the harem of the kings of the world around Israel. But Israel did, because God was creating an upside-down kingdom. Military. You know, you look at the Bible, you're like, wow, there's a lot of wars in the Bible. There's actually a whole lot of rules about warfare in the Bible. It's actually a bit startling when you read it from the perspective of the ancient Near East. Because in that world, the bigger the army, the standing army, the better. The more advanced your weaponry, excellent, because you get to conquer all of the people all around you. And so this would be so much of archaeological evidence and writing and carvings are about this. Horrible battles and massive victories of these armies, how their gods are better than your God because they were able to wipe you out with their massive armies, big chariot battles that they all take pride in. Israel's rules completely different. There's not going to be a standing army. And by the way, you're not allowed to use superior weaponry. What do you mean? If you captured an enemy's superior weapons, say like chariots or war horses, which were game changers in ancient combat, Israel wasn't allowed to use them. They had to hamstring the horses, destroy the chariots. They were not allowed to add even the conquered military power to their own military. Imagine telling the Ukraine, oh, you guys captured, a dozen Russian tanks and you have the shells to use them? Oh, no, I'm sorry, you can't do that. Blow them up. Disable them. This is what God told the Israelites. We would be like, you load those tanks up and you send them to Moscow. That's where they were made. It's an upside down kingdom. That's what we're talking about here. Economics. Every single ancient economy was built in hierarchies. To this day, in this world, they still are. The rich are rich, the poor are poor. They suffer and they get everything. You can accumulate wealth until the powerful are unstoppably powerful. Why would you not? That's actually the game, is to get as much as you possibly can in your short life and then give all of that to your kids so they can get even more. That's the game. That's what we all live by. That's the creed we've all agreed to by doing the kinds of things and living the kinds of way. In the Old Testament, absolutely not. The land wasn't to be accumulated like that. It was given to the people because in that day, the land was the way that you generated wealth. In ancient world, kings would have it. The priests would have all the land. A few handful of strong people would have all of the wealth, all of the land, all of the ability to produce wealth, and you would work as a peasant making peanuts. Some of you are like, no, I would be one of the wealthy. I would be the king. But that's the point. The point is that was the system and how it was structured. And God's like, no, that's not how we're going to do it here in my land. Because the land is mine, God said, and I'm giving it to them, to the people. The people will hold the land. And even if it is mismanaged and someone has to come in and take over for a short period of time, eventually it will be restored back. Every 50 years, the year of Jubilee, the land returns to the original families, even if they lost it through their own neglect. Think about how this would economically change everything. No one could be permanently disenfranchised in that culture. This is just a handful of here's a way Preston, hold the hand of the conservative next to you, please. This is how Preston says it. Social justice, concern for the poor, economic checks on the rich, redistribution of wealth, forgiveness of debt. These aren't liberal or Marxist or woke ideals. They are straight out of the Bible. So are other values like small government, limits on centralized power, and able-bodied people working hard and saving for the future. When Christians think about money and economics, we need to stop letting the rhetoric and categories of Babylon's culture war shape our values. the Bible provides us with some rich categories for thinking about these things. This is why when we are talking about the ethics of this new king, we have to take all of these things back to the scriptures. Are these the kind of values that the Christian right, that the Christian nationalists are talking about right now? I don't think so. And by the way, it wasn't just ancient Israel that did this. Jesus himself did this. He actually gave us a new ethic. He gave us a Bill of Rights, our Constitution. As followers of Jesus in this new kingdom, he actually gave it to us. When the January 6th insurrectionists broke into the Capitol, threatened the Congress people here in the country, you know what they did? If you've seen the video, you know. They quoted the Constitution of America. They quoted the Bill of Rights, screamed that they were defending it. They waved Bibles and they prayed prayers. If only they had been thinking of their Constitution, not the American one. If only they had been embracing their Bill of Rights, the one that King Jesus gave to us. Let those be the battle cry. Oh, by the way, don't start saying that Robert hates the American Constitution or the Bill of Rights or anything, because that isn't true, and I already said I like it, and I don't want to end up on a FBI watch list or get on like the Proud Boys radar or Antifa or anything like that. You can scratch that from the video, from the posting, because I don't want any trouble. Keep my head down and do my thing. But we saw this, right? So last week, I walked you straight through from Matthew, very beginning, first verse in the whole Bible, in the whole New Testament, Matthew chapter 1:1, and we walked all the way through Matthew chapter 4, just hitting some of the highlights that we got to see. All of that was building, all of that talk of empire, all that talk of the new kingdom that was going to come under King Jesus, all led up to Matthew chapter 5. Bible scholars, Bible students here, you know what happens next, Matthew 5, 6, and 7. That's the Sermon on the Mount. This is the new Moses giving the new law for his new kingdom. That's what this is. We call this Sermon on the Mount. This is Moses again. This is a reenactment that Jesus is doing to give us our new Constitution, our new Bill of Rights. Some of these will be familiar with you, but these are all straight out of. This is just a quick summary I want to give you to remind you of your Bill of Rights, your Constitution, from the mouth of Jesus, your King. Here's what he told us. God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth. God blesses those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. God blesses those who work for peace, for they will be called the children of God. When people mock you and persecute you and lie about you and say all sorts of evil things about you because you are my followers, lash out on social media and call people names. No, it does not say that. I added that part. That was a nod to you know who. So what does it say? Because you are my follower, they say all sorts of evil things about you. Be happy about it. Be very glad, Jesus told us. You are the light of the world, he said, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. This is King Jesus telling you, telling me how it is that we are supposed to live. What is the ethic of his new kingdom? I'm still in chapter 5. We haven't even gotten, and I'm skipping stuff. I'm just giving you a sense out of this. If it isn't as familiar with you, here's what he tells. We're still Matthew chapter 5. You have heard the commandment. Our ancestors were told, you must not murder. If you commit murder, you're subject to judgment. But I tell you, if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you are in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse anyone, you are in danger of the fires of hell. If you've heard the commandment that says you must not commit adultery, I say, anyone who even looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If you've heard the law say a man can divorce his wife by merely giving her a written notice of divorce, but I say that a man who divorces his wife, unless she's been unfaithful, causes her to commit adultery. You have heard the law that says the punishment must match the injury, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I say, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other cheek also. If you are sued in court and your shirt is taken from you, give your coat too. If a soldier demands that you carry his gear for a mile, carry it 2 miles. Give to those who ask, and don't turn away from those who want to borrow. You have heard the law. It says, love your neighbor, hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will be also. This is still Matthew 5. We haven't even gotten to 6. In 6, he says things like, you cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. This is why I tell you not to worry about everyday life, whether you have enough food or drink or enough clothes to wear. Isn't life more than food and your body more than clothing? Can all your worries add a single moment to your life? Chapter 7, he says, do not judge others and you will not be judged, for you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. Beware of false prophets who come disguised as harmless sheep, but are really vicious wolves. You can identify them by their fruit, that is, by the way they act. King Jesus, giving us our Bill of Rights, our Constitution, how we're supposed to live in the kingdom of God right now, here, as exiles among empire, with an ethic that transcends both parties. It transcends all of the various ways we have been told that we're supposed to live and do and be. This is what he's calling us to. So I want to draw some of these lines together here for us. I want to encourage us to distrust all political parties. Every single Christian who votes has to hold their nose when they go to the polling booth. You just have to. There's no other way around it. If you're going to vote, and I encourage it, your political party is not God's party. It never has been, and it never will be. Jesus resisted being co-opted by any of the political parties of his day. They tried plenty of times to get him to give them his thumbs up, and he steadfastly disappointed them. Preston, again, he says it like this. It's natural that Christians will resonate with some partisan values more than others. I resonate with some messages promoted by the Democratic Party. The same goes for the Republican Party. But I refuse to give any kind of loyalty or allegiance to either party. As a Christian whose citizenship is in God's global kingdom, I can't give my loyalty to any earthly kingdom or to a certain party trying to rule that kingdom. Loyalty to one party nearly always requires you to be against the other party. Such an us versus them perspective will most likely suck you into a tribalistic battle God never called you to fight. It's one thing to look at each party from a distance and resonate with certain values they claim to promote. But when you give your loyalty to a particular party, you begin to view the world through the lens they've created for you. And make no mistake, political tribes aren't just after your vote, they're after your heart. And they are very good at making disciples. When we are engaging in the politics of Babel, form your positions based on your deep study of the scriptures. It is mind-boggling how many times I have come up with a political position and I've never gone to the scriptures to find out what it has to say about it. And I have spoken to many people, some of you, who are so passionate about some political position, but when asked what Jesus has to say about it, what your king has to say about it, blank stares. The confidence of your position should at least be somehow related to the depth of your study. Not what your party has been telling you, but to the depth of your study of your Constitution, of your Bill of Rights as a follower of King Jesus. You have less study, then be less certain. And at all times, always more humility. So yes, we're going to fight for justice. That's part of what our role is. But are we fighting with Babylon's tools? Are we raising up the weapons of Babel in order to fight our fights? Because that's not what King Jesus did. Quite the opposite. We have to implement politics that create a just society and work toward mercy and compassion. So absolutely get involved, do the work, all of that. But how we do it matters. You know, the immigration thing is a great example of this because it's a massive fiasco going on at the border. If we're watching any of it, everyone knows no one has a good answer to it. It's extremely complex. It involves dynamics around the whole planet, and there's just, it seems like no one really gets it or understands it. No one really knows what to do. But no matter what you do, someone from one side or from both sides is going to yell and criticize you. And so you're just trying to the best you can figure this thing out. Well, there's a church in San Antonio that was faced with this decision. Pastor John Garland. And he told the story that he was one of these churches where all of a sudden a whole bunch of asylum seekers started getting bussed in and dropped off on the corner near his church. And so he was like, well, what are we supposed to do? Like, there's all of these people just living on the streets now. You know, no opportunity, no food, no water, no shelter above their heads. And he was like, what are we supposed to do? He's like, well, we have our church, which isn't really our church. It's Jesus' church. The building itself is even in Jesus. And the community here is actually all followers of Jesus. So what is it that Jesus is calling us to do? And so they decided they would open up the church and provide food and shelter and clothing and medicine and whatever the people needed, the asylum seekers. And of course, people were freaking out. Right? You got people, oh my goodness, what's going on? These people shouldn't be left on the streets like this. And, the government needs to step in and do something. And then on the other side, they're like, you can't do this. You're supporting all of this. People are going to be coming in. They're going to be violent. They're going to be criminals. They're going to be, stealing your children and eating your dogs. And so we got to be really careful. This is really, really bad. And you're supporting it. You're encouraging it. The church shouldn't be doing this kind of thing, getting involved in these political sort of ways. And this guy's like, There's hungry people, thirsty people sitting there. What else are we supposed to do? So what is he going to do? Call on the government to fix things? What's his resource? Is he supposed to make the government fix the immigration problem? There are hungry people outside his church. Feed them. What else do you need to know? Look at the ethic of Jesus. Feed them, clothe them, shelter them. Show them the love of Christ. And he said, one of the things that he reported, which was awesome, I loved it. He said, almost everything, like 10% of what you read in the newspaper about this whole thing was true. Everything else was just all lies and hyperbole is what he was saying. He was there on the ground, when this was all going on. And he said, here's one of the things that really shocked him. 85% of those asylum seekers were followers of Jesus. And all of a sudden, a shift started taking place. And he was like, wait a second. These are my people. This isn't even a question. Like, these are my people. What am I supposed to do with my brothers and sisters in Christ who are sitting on the street corner right now without food and water? Forget the other 15%, which are still our responsibility as part of our call to care for the world's poor. But these are actually my people. And everyone in the world's calling them the other. The them, not the us. Allegiance to our King and to his ethic trumps everything. And love of enemy is the very starting point of that ethic. Would you guys pray with me? Lord, what we're asking is that you would help us to take these teachings from your word, your call to us, your charge. You hit hard. Even in just these few chapters that we just gleaned through, Lord, you have decided to show us what it means to follow you as King. I'm praying, Lord, that we would have soft hearts and we would have fierce courage, that we would become the women and the men that we need to be to represent you well here as exiles among empires. We would stand fast, stand firm in our commitment to you and to your way. Help us, Lord. Give us the power of the Spirit. We pray it in Christ's name. Amen.